Hello, happy Friday to everybody. I'm Jen Lee, and this is Automation Hour. If you're joining us for the first time, all lines will be muted. Please post your questions to the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer Community. And sometime after the session, we will post the link to the recording as well as the deck out on our website, automationhour.com. Also, we'll post out on our Trailblazer Community, Salesforce Automation Hour, as well as our YouTube channel. You can search for us, Salesforce Automation Hour. And I want to highlight our upcoming sessions. We are booked through the end of July and are currently soliciting additional speakers for the rest of the year. So if you have a business use case and a cool automation solution that you would like to share, sign up on that bit.ly link there. So I do want to highlight a special session that we have scheduled for June 5th, and this is with the Salesforce Automation Product Management team, and they will be doing a deeper dive of some of the summer 20 release items that they'll highlight during the release readiness live sessions, but they'll go into more detail in our session here, as well as share some a sneak peek into the roadmap. So definitely sign up for that. If you could attend live, that'd be great because they'll give you an opportunity to ask questions of them live. And we can't bring this free online webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io. So great shout out to them. And here are your co-hosts, Rakesh, David, and I. This was from last year's Midwest Dreamin, and maybe we'll see each other in 2021 for some other Dreamin events. But before I go on further and introduce our guest speaker, I want to throw it over to Rakesh real quick to do a last minute plug for virtual Dreamin, which is happening tomorrow.
Thanks, Jen. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining today's Automation Hours. My name is Rakesh, and I'm here to invite you all to join the first Salesforce virtual Dreamin, which is going to happen tomorrow. And let me see if I can share my screen just for a moment. No, I can leave it. So I think I don't have a right to share my screen. Okay. So you can go to the virtualdreamin.com site, and then you can see the registration link, or you can check the agenda builder. So this is a 24-hour session. So we have 100+ sessions scheduled, 10+ CTAs is coming, and we have track for admin, developers, architect, equality, mentality, and health. So there are lots of sessions scheduled. So if you want to learn something new in Salesforce, or you are in a journey to CTA, we have dedicated sessions for that. So please join tomorrow starting from 10 a.m. Eastern, and the URL is virtualdreamin.com. Thank you. Back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Rakesh. Okay, and with that, we're excited to have Stewart McNaught on. I had the privilege of presenting with Stewart and Cheryl Feldman at past Dreamforce on automation with custom metadata types. So I'm really excited for Stewart to share what he has built with the whole COVID-19 situation there. So I'm going to hand it off to Stewart to introduce himself.
All right. I'm going to quickly just show my screen, and hopefully you guys see the same thing right now. It's what Jen had up. Jen, can you confirm that for me?
Yes, we see the slide.
Awesome. So my name's Stewart McNaught, and like Jen said, I did get the opportunity to present with 2 golden hoodies at Dreamforce 2 years ago, and it was a great pleasure to be able to present custom metadata at a time when everybody had lots of questions on custom metadata. A little bit about me. I am as of this year, a Salesforce developer at Zions Bancorp. which is a bank, Western bank with 11 that operates in 11 states and has 7 affiliates. The key to Zions Bank is that we operate as separate banks in each of our different affiliate areas, with technology being the area where you get the most gains. Additional to what I do for work, I host Salesforce Saturday with Mike White and Eric Kinney every other Saturday, if we ever get back to doing things in person, and once a month currently. And we have a meeting tomorrow. So if you'd like to join us for Salesforce Saturday, we have a meetup that you can look for, and I'll provide the link for it later. Additionally, I sometimes blog when I have time, when work doesn't get in the way, on my my website, skeletonforce.com. I am a trailhead addict, not to the extent of Jen and Mike White, but I am about halfway there through the badges, and I have 423 currently. If you ever have any questions or need any follow-up to this slide deck, you can reach me mostly on Twitter, is where I'm most responsive, and that's at McNaught Stew. And then anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that our family Astro travels with us everywhere. And he has his own tag in Salesforce that we use, which is Adventures with Astro. And if I ever get to go on any other vacations here soon, I'll have more pictures up there. So in today's presentation, what we're going to talk about is how some lessons learned that we at the Bancorp had learned while we were dealing with the CARES app for the Paycheck Protection Program, how we used Rapid Application Development to facilitate the PPP program, and how we utilize Salesforce and flows specifically for the intake of that program. I'm not going to go into a lot of downstream automation that we did. I'm really going to focus on the intake of the application. And to that, I'm going to talk about the data, some of the process automations that we did, some of the tools that we used, and how, even after we completed the intake stuff, some of the lessons learned and how I've retooled that solution, or how I would retool that solution, to be more specific, to do things better the second time around. I'll demo I'll go through a demo really quick of my flow, as well as some of the components, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. So specifically to the Paycheck Protection Program, for folks that aren't familiar with what the government's response was, Paycheck Protection Program is really intended for small businesses that are being affected by COVID-19. It was signed into law on March 27th. The first go around was $349 billion. There have since been, so that money went really, really fast. The second round of $310 billion was then added to the mix. It's broken down into 3 phases. You've got the application phase, which was really qualifications and your business information, getting all that validated and pushed up to the SBA. Then the small business companies then would track over 8 weeks how they're using those funds, and those funds had to fall within 4 or 5 major categories. And then starting in June, we'll be moving into the forgiveness phase, which would cover, which will give us opportunities to work with the SBA, with these small businesses to get the documentation so that those loans that we originally set up for them could be potentially up to 100% forgiven. So this program and this law is actually there really hasn't been anything like this from a government response. And from an SBA response, one of the key things that I thought was that really pulled out for me is that in the 14 days of round one, they processed more loans than they had in the last 14 years. So the scale and speed of which everybody had to respond really pushed everybody to be innovative and get everything there. So from a Bancorp stance, I'm going to do a little bit of a little bit of brag here. Our affiliates are in 11 states. We had 140 times our regular loan volume within our loan center, and we're really proud of the fact that we helped preserve over 600,000 separate jobs that's out there. And as you can see, a significant dollar amount for those SBA loans. Specific to Utah, according to the SBA, we have 97% coverage of the small businesses. So I'm really proud of everything that we did within the first 2 weeks there to get these opportunities and help support some of these struggling small businesses. So getting into the meat of the topic here. So what is RAD? Rapid Application Development. It is a methodology of which you really are focusing on speed to market. You're trying to get everything you can out and in front of everybody. And it's not a particular case where you want everything to be perfect right out of the gate. You want to make sure that you have all of the highlights and key points covered, but you worry less about look and feel when you're first coming out of the gate, and you're more focused on getting your iterations started so you can get the feedback and you can start moving through and building things out with speed in mind. And the key within the RAD methodology is that you build things in modules so that you can quickly get to subsections and you can focus on those subsections. For today's model, I'm going to point out within my flow, which is an actual single flow, but I'm going to point out where I would be building these out as separate subflows and have anything called from a parent. So specific to the Paycheck Protection Program on Salesforce, the very first thing you need to do is try to figure out what kind of data you need to capture and then work that back to some sort of data model so you can figure out within Salesforce where you're going to store those. Then just like with any other project within Salesforce, you got to figure out your visibility and sharing. In this particular case, because we are dealing with customers, we actually set up a community. We were not community users prior, but we did set up a community. We determined, also had to determine reports and dashboards, so the KPIs and progress of the data. Moving into the application, how we were going to capture, where we're going to capture that, downstream, how we were going to push data, and how we were going to get customer signatures, integration into our other core systems at the Bancorp, and then obviously the process automation. So at the very, very high level, this is the application. This is the official application that the SBA put out. And so as you can see, I've color coded certain sections that it would work to us, how we would want to modulize or break things down into subgroups. So you have your basic qualifications here in orange. That is used to kind of weed out who shouldn't qualify and who should qualify. You've got the business information the ownership information and the loan request. And in each of these, there's additional rules that the SBA had put in place, and so you would have to make sure that you're getting the right documentation, that you're getting all of the various key elements to make sure that everybody was able to apply when they could apply. Additionally, there are some certifications, and with these certifications, we wanted to make sure that we captured these as well, and not just have individual signatures, authorized signers, and then obviously tracking any sort of documentation that needed to come through. So basically, how did we do this? We broke down each of those sections into subgroups that would then be presented through a flow on the community page. So qualifications, and then not allowing individuals to move forth if they didn't qualify. Potentially you could save that record so you can use it for some sort of leads down the road for that business, capturing all the business information and moving forward. Then once you actually had an application, you would want to then get that out in front of bankers. You want to move any sort of notifications and process that loan through as much automation and approval processes as possible. And then the stage that we are now moving into will be back into the communities and looking for the qualifications and the new documents that we need to track, again, involving any sort of bankers or individuals that need to get notified and do any sort of approval processes, so that we can get those for the forgiveness documentation pushed back up to the SBA. So how did we do this? So on the App Exchange, there's a few things that make the process a lot easier. And coming from a developer standpoint, you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel unless you really have to. And with Salesforce, as anybody who uses Salesforce knows, there's a lot of stuff we can do right out of the box. However, some App Exchange packages you would need to do, like a DocuSign to get your signature capture. And then Salesforce Labs, if you're not aware of it, the Salesforce Labs has a lot of applications that are on App Exchange that potentially you could utilize within your process. Again, speed to market. There's no reason to go in and recreate the wheel if that wheel's already been created. And in Salesforce, if it's something that's out on the App Exchange, then it's already been reviewed, and you'll be able to get to market a lot quicker. Additionally to the App Exchange, there is a number of resources within the community. With summer coming out and the low code announcement that we had just last week, there's a new Trailhead sample gallery that is out there specifically for flows and automation. And within there's some key UI elements that I would strongly encourage people to install into their sandboxes and play with, as well as some of the security things and things that are within that particular gallery. If you can take the opportunity to spend some time, train yourself on how to use it, it will save you some time when you're working on your individual projects. Additional to the Trailhead sample gallery, there is a website that's out there that I know that Jen Lee has also blogged about, and we'll have Eric Smith here in a future presentation present, called Unofficial Salesforce. And the main person who set that up is Alex, and he is actually on the Salesforce Flow team. And so he is encouraging the community to bring stuff to market and let other people experiment with things. Many of the items that you find in the Trailhead sample gallery actually came out of initiatives within the unofficial Salesforce website. And I commend everybody who has added to that particular side project. There specifically for flows, there are flow screen elements as well as flow actions. With spring 20 and summer 20, flows have really been given a boost, and we're going to be able to do a lot more with flows, and dare I say, move closer to replacing triggers, in my opinion. So, all right. So, getting to how you actually do things. My suggestion of how you would iterate through working through things is start with your data model. Data model is key to your success. If you just say, I'm going to do a custom object and just leave it at that, you're not really giving yourself a lot of leeway, because there's a lot of information that can be stored on the native objects. So definitely spend time to make sure that you have a data model that will support not just the initial need, but anything downstream. Second of all, look for opportunities within what you're trying to set up to make sure that you can introduce some hide show logic, and make sure that you have try to interpret what's going to be downstream, as far as downstream requirements, so that you can pre-build it into your flow. Then once you've got somewhat of a stable flow in place, then start working with who needs to be notified, doing field validations and whatnot. And again, get feedback from your initial test group. And then once you've got a fairly stable thing, and you've got minor, you're about ready to release to the wild, then you start talking about look and feel, because colors and whatnot don't really matter unless you've got your flow working the way it needs to be. With the RAD model, the key to success is the continuous feedback loop. And so document. The can't say enough, because whatever project that you're using RAD for, there are going to be questions after you're complete. And if you're in meetings, it's a lot easier to point to a document and say the decision was made to do this than to say a decision was made. So, and the last piece here is that document how the RAD process that you're using is actually aligning with your shareholders' priorities, because then you can actually speak to how you're providing value. All right, enough talk. We will move into the demo. So Jen, at this time, if you have any questions, we can maybe start with those, and then we can go jump into the demo.
The only question posted, not related to your presentation, but someone did ask whether virtual Dreamin sessions will be recorded, and the only session that will be recorded is the keynote that will be posted on YouTube afterwards. All the other ones you'll have to attend live.
Awesome.
All right, you can proceed, Stewart.
Awesome. All right, so just to be very clear, this is not what I'm presenting is being presented out of a developer org, or sorry, out of a developer org. It is not what I actually have released to the wild for the Bancorp, but it uses the lessons learned from our initial process, the wild week of that first week of, and then things that we've learned and ways that I would have changed it had we had time to think things through. So the components here that I want to call out, and I'll actually go into the flow in just a second, or actually into the flow builder in a second, is having a custom header that has a path so that folks can actually see where they're going and when they're going to get to things is really beneficial. The standard objects or standard components, web components, like the text fields, allow you to provide instructions. The validations, if you can keep folks on the page for validations, will save you from using the dreaded back button, which causes a lot of pain if you don't handle it properly. So what I want to point out here is usage of a Salesforce Labs custom footers and custom headers, and the use of quick choice here. And I've got the 3 different varieties of quick choice shown, that you can have one component, and through one component you can have radio buttons, you can have it come back as a pick list, or you can have it come back as specific cards with icons of which you then can control how it's displayed and which icons are displayed. Part of this also is the requirement piece. So if anybody is used to programming on a regular pick list, you would know that you have to actually leave the screen, test with the decision afterwards, throw in your warning message back in, and you have to do that for every single field that is a pick list. With quick choice, because required is built in, you don't have to do any of that extra handling. It will check to see if there's a value, and if there's not a value, it'll throw the actual question back up and say it needs to be responded to. The other thing with the text is that you can actually put in URLs directly into your text. And so if you have anything that needs to be redirected or anything, you can actually have things like this where you can have a URL. So how did we do this, or how did I do this? So the quick choice, I'm actually not tied to any specific fields when I'm building the quick choice out. I'm utilizing just a text, and I'm establishing certain the variables within those, then making a decision, loading up data if we've already got one, and then getting to the screen. So on the quick choice, the pieces that I want to really point out here is that, those 3 choices that you can use, how you utilize the card mode, and then this uses the collections, the text collections, the exact same way that you had in the assignment. The labeling, you can directly tie it to specific fields. You can have it specify based on record types. And the key here that made all the difference for us is turning the requirement on to leave everything in context to that screen and not having to leave. Additionally, on the footers, this again is the custom header and footer component. Within here, you can actually change the verbiage of your traditional finish, back, pause, and next buttons within Salesforce, within a Salesforce flow. When you utilize the custom footers and the custom headers, you want to make sure that for the screen altogether, that you are turning off the headers, the regular custom, the native custom headers, or sorry, native headers and the native footers, so that you're presenting the message that you want, you're controlling the message that you want to send. On the custom headers, The key pieces when you're utilizing this this element is that you want to make sure that you are using the built-in flow current stages and active stages. And again, you can specify your headers, your subheaders, you can put in help text, you can do icons using the standard SLDS icons. And where this comes into play for your users is as you step into each screen, you set the current stage into what it needs to be, and then that will progress just like on path in Salesforce and Lightning. It'll just progress to that chevron within the path. Additionally, there's a second, instead of using the path kind of view, there is a progression bar that I don't have an example of, but it will be in the slide deck. It's just a line with dots on it, and the dots represent each of your active stages that would be required or that will be shown. Some other elements that we used to kind of dig into or kind of present everything was we used the standard file upload component within flows. Now, this component is really powerful, and there's a number of blogs that are out there on how to use it, but particularly the key pieces for using file upload is you want to make sure that you're tying it to a specific record for visibility and for attachment. Then if you're going to control the specifically what you want to upload, so if your particular Salesforce org is concerned about Excel files and viruses and whatnot, you can actually not include those file types as being allowed. Again, focusing maybe on your documents, your PDFs, and your JPEGs. So it allows you to provide help text, hover text, and once you have information, once you have the files uploaded, you can actually capture the names of those files to be able to present that on a second screen. Then the other pieces that I wanted to present to everybody here is that for each of these subsections, this is where, if you have multiple people on your team, this is where I would actually start doing some subflows so that other folks can help you get to market quicker. The key pattern here that you want to use is starting with that stage. Starting with the stage assignments, you then set the stage, you go into your particular screen, you come out with whatever variables that you are, and then you have your upload. We elected to do multiple uploads or multiple pushes back down to the database after somebody leaves each of the screens so that the customer would not lose whatever data that they had entered had they abandoned the process somewhere in the middle. They could always come back to it, and without having a particular paused flow on waiting within our org, we would just reload that particular record from the point at which they left off. So with that, each of these patterns that you see here, this would basically represents a subflow within the process. Then, so like I said earlier, if you have multiple people on your team, then you can spread the love here, and you can kind of get to market quicker. The last item that I would draw attention to is the use of actions within your flows. For those who don't use invocable actions are code that can be called directly from a flow to act upon to act upon the database or to interact with the screen. So in particular here, what I've utilized is a component off of the community, off of unofficialsalesforce.com, that's called Show Toast. And what Show Toast does is it allows us to post a notification onto the screen, and we can control the look and feel of that notification. So you can, there's many different pieces here. Again, you can bring in custom icons out of the SLDS icon directory. You can have your own messages. You can also provide a URL within those within that notification, so that a customer can then click on it to get additional information. So at this point, I'm going to drop back into the actual loan application that I have here. So I've already pre-filled some of these things, but if you see here, another piece that I forgot to say is that when you're debugging, when you're in Flow Builder and you're in the debug mode, the Show Toast will not show the notification on screen, because it actually it will lose context because of the way that this is wrapped. So you will, for testing of those components, you'll want to drop down into a page layout or into your community to see how those are going to be working. And to that end, if I come back in here, you'll see that this is just a Lightning web page where I've added in a tab element for the intake flow, and then I've just specified the specific flow for the process. So we're on the first screen here. As you can see, previously I moved it from no to yes, and that's been updated. If we hit next, you get here, and for some reason the notification didn't fire. Again, I found when we were building our process that we used pick lists, but I believe it's more efficient to use the radio buttons for any future. And then, as you can see, here's a general notification. This is an information notification. I'm a dad, so I've got lots of dad jokes. They'll be built into these. And as you can see here, we've moved out of qualification and we've moved into certification. So we've set that stage to move forward. Jen has a great blog on how to use this. I believe it's from a year and a half ago. And then as you move through these, you can see that each time that you've pushed it to the database, I have this pushing a notification coming out of it. So, and that, I think, is the end of what I expected to demo. Do we have any other questions, or do we have any questions out there, Jen?
Let's see. Let me check on the Trailblazer community. So if folks have a question about Stewart's presentation or a general process automation question, do post your questions either on the chat section here or out on our Trailblazer community. So let me go out on the community, see if anyone's posted there.
So while Jen's doing that, what I've presented here is really just four key components. And there are a number of other components that are out there that I could have brought to the presentation. An example of that would be Salesforce Labs has a signature capture that's out there. We could have at the entry of this flow, we could have done some sort of sign-in that would capture consent or capture understanding, user understanding. Additionally, there's subflows that you should be able to set up so that if you have a brand new customer come in, that you use the key elements of their login to then associate that new user or new contact to an existing account. Other forms of automation that you can then use to use for your security model. So did we have any questions, Jen?
Yes, we do. So before I get to the questions, Gordon noted, I'm glad to see that Stewart's promoting that no one likes a cheetah. All right. So we have two questions from John Kucera. Thanks, John, for joining us. He's the PM for the Salesforce automation team at Salesforce. So he says, this is fantastic. Who were the people submitting the applications? Was it customers or non-customers via community?
So great question. We had information come from 3 different planes. So we had a web to lead form that pushed to a lead, and then from the lead we then used automation to push in into our object. The second kind of phase or second route that individuals could take was through their individual banker, and their banker would then walk them through filling out the form. And in that particular case, we actually had bankers who filled it out directly in Salesforce, and some that worked with their customers on the community site. And then finally, we had customers who would log in into the community, and then would be taken through a similar process to what I demoed here, to which they would then fill out their forms, leave, come back with the documents that they needed to be done or needed to upload, and then their certifications, their DocuSigns, and all that things. So great question.
All right. Part 2 from John. What was the time from ideation to first live in production, which folks could leverage?
I want to say it's all a blur. those first couple days, I was informed on Sunday. We then really started working on it Monday morning, and so I'm going to say 12 hours, give and take, all the way through. We had our first customer was in the wee hours of the morning that Monday night, if I recall correctly. So we had a lot of, being a bank, we had a lot of individuals within our legal team that needed to sign off on processes and give us additional questions outside of the application that we had to ensure that we're a part of our process.
Great. Next question is from Jim. Is it possible to show how the file upload works and extracts the file name?
I can't show the extract of the file name in this particular demo, but what I can do, the upload itself, gotta remember which screen I put that on. And I don't have my logic in here for handling going back, so just give me a second. Oh, our new helper.
Yep, sorry, my coworker.
It's all good. He or she. She is very, very cute. If anybody doesn't follow Jen on Twitter, you get awesome pictures. So the file upload component, and if I can just bring in one of my samples. So the way that this works, you can just drop it directly on, and then it will go through and do the upload itself. I'll show the back end of this in just a second. Or you can click on it and then it'll bring up a file mechanism, which you can then go through and choose which file you want to upload. So in this particular case, we will do just a sample and then the sample PDF. And what it's doing on the back side, it's automatically associating it with me as the individual who's doing the upload. So in this particular, in the case of when we're doing the uploads, it would be the customer and it'd be associated with that customer's user. And then additionally, because we've specified the record ID of the loan, it's associating that with the loan itself. So great question. What you then, for programming their flow for the second screen so you can show the files that were uploaded, you would then go out to, I believe it's content version, and then that's where you would actually be able to show the individual fields. I didn't actually program it for this this particular presentation to be able to capture that though. So next question. Jen, did we have any other questions?
Oh, I was on mute. So the next question is from Nikhil. Curious, what leads you to think flows could replace triggers in the future? Wouldn't some developers prefer having more control via back-end logic rather than being limited to what's available in the UI?
So I'm gonna use a forward-looking statement with that. Safe harbor, and if we had Steve Moe here, I'd have him say it. What I'm saying for that is because of where we're going with summer 20, with being able to do a evaluate a flow based on a platform event or based on a record being saved, we've actually eliminated the need for process builders in the middle, so we can actually trigger directly off of a particular event. The reason that I say that, in my opinion, I consider triggers to just be listeners, and that all the heavy lifting it would be done either through an Apex or through additional development that you would do on the platform. So whether that be Apex, that be a flow, that be a platform event, there is functionality that you would you'd have there that you'd want to call upon. So in Salesforce Saturday, when I'm describing what a trigger would do is basically it's listening for that secret knock. And because it hears the secret knock, it's then going to do additional work. With invocable Apex, even if you are utilizing a Salesforce and you need to have that finite control that you would then have through your regular trigger, you can still set up your regular your Apex to do that and to have variables called into it. So again, that's my opinion. I actually came up through the admin path, and so declarative is where I start, and then if if and only if it can't be done through a declarative tool, then I start looking at developing through code.
So I'm just going to add on additional notes from John Casera, who is the Salesforce product manager on automation. And he notes that Salesforce will be publishing a Salesforce architecture guide on when to use which to help inform this topic. And that will likely be early July.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Look forward to reading it.
And again, to note, June 5th, he'll be back to talk about those Summer 20 enhancements in a deeper dive.
Yeah, and I'll just put it out there. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for Salesforce. So it is my opinion that it will be able to replace triggers.
All right, and our next question is from Jacob. Is the intent of this to A, enable the automation of the back-end processing, or B, the automation of the end-to-end, including data entry from applicants?
A little bit of both. So the intent of what I'm demoing is really the intake from the customer to make sure that they're answering the questions that need to be answered for the SBA PPP application. However, as you are going through and through your RAD development, you want to make sure that you keep everything in mind for your downstream users or downstream systems that need to be that need to consume your data. So within the flow, if you can address some need that's going to be downstream, or some regulation that's come out since you started, or because there was a bit of that at the beginning of this program as well, that you push to get as much data up front as you possibly can to support the processes post intake.
Great, so as a reminder, if folks have additional questions about Stewart's presentation, post out to here or on the Trailblazer community. Jason just posted one. Do the end users, customers, who use this application need to have a community account, or did it allow for guest users? You mentioned you did not have community set up in your org. Did your team launch a community as well in that 12 to 24 hours from idea to launch?
Yes, we became community experts really, really quick.
Learn by fire.
Learned by fire. In our particular case, yes, each of our customers were then set up with a community user. I can't remember the class of community user. I want to say that it was a plus, but I could be wrong. But the Bancorp made a decision through Salesforce help, made a decision that would be beneficial for us to have a community. With flows, there are ways to get flows to appear on site pages using a Lightning out, because you can't actually use Lightning directly on a site page because it drops back to Classic. But I would highly recommend using communities. Communities made it, again, quicker to market, allowed us to get things to the customers really quick, as well as being able to present data back up to them using Lightning page layouts and whatnot. So it definitely helped with our speed to get things out and to follow RAD as much as possible. So.
So Jason followed up, a very impressive time frame on what you and your team put together and launched with Flow in a new community, and what else I am sure you needed to work on to make this work in your org. Great job.
Thank you very much. Not just me, it was me and my team. And there's a number of folks that helped make this possible at Zions. We dedicated around 2,000 users total to the process. A lot of those being individual bankers working with their clients. But we had a great automation, we had a great admin team that worked kind of in the middle, getting all the automation once the intake happened. And then my specific team focused on the communities and on the flows in the intake. So it was great work all around. And it's the type of situation where you don't really want to be in that situation, but when you come out from the other side and you see what you actually accomplished, it is just amazing that we are able to utilize the Salesforce functionality in such a way that made it possible for us to deliver something really, really quickly. So.
All right, so last call for questions while we wait and see if anyone has anything else. Stewart, tell me how you learned Flow.
I was one of the early adopters way back when. I actually started out with I don't think that you can actually have this anymore, flow triggers, and then learned it at Dreamforce after the beta. Then there was a great presentation that I'm going to blank on his name. Salesforce Yoda. Help me out, Jen. I can't
Mark
remember.
Ross.
Mark Ross, thank you. He's doing documentation for Flow. Mark Ross, one of the early presentations I sat in at a Dreamforce, self-taught a lot of myself with flows. And I'm just somebody who likes to get in and play with things and see how things work, how I can break things. I like pushing all the buttons. I read the release notes. It's 500 pages, but if you break that out over a couple days or out of a week, it actually breaks it down really small. Just playing with things. I'm somebody who just likes to push all the buttons. And so learning flows, teaching flows, creating a passion project, and I'll explain that in just a second. Creating a passion project of which you own and it's your idea, that kind of drives learning. And so a passion project is a project that you come up on your own, that it's not for your employer, it's for you, and you build a process and you build an application end to end so that you can test your skills. And that could be taking a Trailhead project and extending it. That could be, I know somebody who organized their Magic Gathering cards using Salesforce. I know other people that used Salesforce and flows to learn flows by creating a feedback application in Salesforce. I have converted the Salesforce Labs action plans flow or action plans into process builders and flows and platform events, so that because there's no reason to jump into 40 pieces of code and if you can do it in a flow. So it's basically just taking the initiative and following in Trailhead and testing your abilities.
Mm-hmm.
In a former life, I was also a teacher, so kind of goes with that.
All right, so I do not see any more questions. I mean, this was a really awesome use case in how you were able to take your requirements and using low code, deliver that in a really quick time frame. So thanks for presenting that, and definitely, Stewart, come back and present again.
Happy to.
All right. Great, and with that, we're going to wrap up this automation hour. So again, register for June 5th, where we'll have Salesforce come and do a deep dive of summer 2020 enhancements. And until then, we'll talk to you later. Thanks, everybody.